Thank you so much for joining us today for this webinar, co-hosted by NoBlue2 and Avalara. I'm Fiona from NoBlue2, and we're delighted to have you with us today. Today's session will focus on the 5 things you need to know how to expand your business internationally, and we've got 2 expert speakers who will share their valuable insights with us today. I'm now pleased to introduce our speakers today. We have Adam Ladd from NoBlue2, and we have Steve Bartholomew from Avalara. Over to you guys.
Good morning, and thank you, Fiona. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time on today's Wednesday morning, wherever you may be. We've got a very busy schedule ahead for you this morning, and I'm pleased to welcome Steve from Avalara, who we work very closely with both currently and over the past few years. So welcome, Steve. How are you doing?
Thanks very much, Adam. I'm doing very well. Good to see you again, and good to see so many of you joining the webinar today.
Absolutely. Well, fantastic. Well, we've got 5 main topics that we'll be covering off, as Fiona alluded to, so perhaps we'll get into it. Initially, a little bit of background about ourselves. My name is Adam Ladd, as I say, and I'm the Director of Account Management and Partnerships here at NoBlue2. So really what that means is I'm responsible for looking after our customers, but actually also making sure that our customers have access to the best in breed solutions beyond NetSuite. So where complexity may require functionality outside of NetSuite, we're pleased to partner with solutions like Avalara and Steve's organization to make sure our customers have the right solutions to satisfy their needs, in this case, for tax compliance. So a little bit about NoBlue2, for those of you that might not know us. I know we've got a great deal of customers on today's call, but for those of you that might not know, we have been in the ERP industry for over 25 years and are positioned as one of NetSuite's largest partners in EMEA, with over 350 customers. Some of the logos you can see on screen. Actually, some of the logos on screen are also Avalara customers that we implemented over the course of the last few years. Really, we are a truly international organization and have implemented both NetSuite and Avalara to a number of countries across the world, in fact, over 60 countries at last count, and have a huge realm of experience, both in NetSuite and implementing tax solutions like Avalara to our customers, and have done over 1,000 projects in the industry over the past few years. And like with all these things, partnership is important, and we've gone on a journey with Avalara over the last few years, and in fact have over 40 mutual customers that we'll be referring to a little bit throughout the course of today's session. So Steve, perhaps a few words of introduction from yourself and Avalara.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Adam. So yes, my name's Steve. I'm a tax technology manager here at Avalara. I've actually been at Avalara now for 4 years, and I support businesses that are looking to grow, expand into new or existing markets from an indirect tax compliance perspective. So here at Avalara, we have a broad range of solutions that help businesses to simplify that process and take away the worry of expanding internationally. So a little bit about Avalara. We are a US business. We're headquartered in Seattle, and our inception was back in 2004. So we were established because of the complexity of US sales tax compliance. However, we are now very much an international business, and we've got over 41,000 customers around the world across our product suite. Now, NetSuite is one of our longest standing partners. 20 years we've partnered with NetSuite, and over 4,000 of our customers use NetSuite as their ERP. So we're very experienced with NetSuite, and our technology complements NetSuite to provide businesses with a seamless approach to their indirect tax compliance. It's great working with NoBlue2. We've worked on a number of very successful projects together, Avalara utilising our technology, and then NoBlue2 providing that a really important service to implement seamlessly. So that's Avalara. Like I say, I'm delighted to be able to talk to you today about things you should consider when you're expanding internationally. Thanks, Adam.
Lovely stuff. So let's get into some of the details. So really, as you as an organization, it's quite a daunting thing trying to understand how you would like to grow your organization. Many of your organizations might be private equity or venture capital backed, with huge expectations to grow at pace, at scale, but also in ultimately with the least amount of resistance to make sure that you achieve your goals in a timely manner. So one of the first things that we want to discuss today is about how to enable your team to be set up for success. So Steve, maybe you could give us a little bit of insight as to how and some of the indirect tax considerations for businesses that are looking to expand globally.
Yeah, of course. I think number one is really kind of what the international tax legislation is. I think businesses, when they're growing internationally, there is that kind of like worry, like what does it actually mean for us? Like, how are we impacted by that? What legislation do we need to adhere to? So certainly businesses are thinking about kind of what rate of tax do I need to calculate? How am I going to calculate that tax? Particularly in jurisdictions where it might be quite complicated. So there may be things like reverse charge, or it may be the US where there's a huge number of different taxing jurisdictions. So we see businesses, one of the first things they need to consider is how are we going to make sure that we are calculating the correct amount of tax when we are transacting with businesses or customers across those markets. The next part, of course, is the reporting, because it's essential that you're compliant. So part of that is calculating the correct amount of tax. But of course, you then need to consider what do I need to do to report within that country. Now, a lot of businesses we see do have quite laborious, quite time-consuming approaches to calculating, but also filing. So really importantly, it's considering, do we have the technology to do this? Do we have the technology to automate it, to save us time, to optimize what we're doing to be successful as we expand into those countries? Now, the other point really comes down to whether or not a business is shipping goods or tangible products, because you've then got the other layer of complexity surrounding kind of what's the customs clearance process. And some of the key parts there are things like tariff codes and duties calculation. So in summary, really, businesses are looking to ensure they're calculating the correct tax. That takes into consideration where the customs are and what their product or service is. But then we have to look at the reporting element as well, and whether or not there is that customs clearance required if shipping tangible goods. So they are the considerations that we typically see businesses having as they expand globally. And then, of course, it's making sure that they've got the technology to do that, and they've also got the partners to help them seamlessly integrate to those new technologies.
And I think one of the couple of other bits that we were going to touch on as well, Steve, is you mentioned about automation there. How can we leverage perhaps e-invoicing to take away some of that time burden that is perhaps on finance teams to manually do it? That how can we drive automation in that regard and enabling and building a tech stack that's suitable to drive some of that growth and scalability, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first and foremost, businesses want a lean tech stack, okay? They don't want, lots and lots of different technologies, because that can sometimes be difficult to implement, but also it can be difficult to maintain. So we see businesses wanting a lean tech stack. And e-invoicing is something that is now on the landscape and is impacting a great number of businesses, particularly where they've got an international presence. So, for example, if you've got entities in the likes of Italy or Germany, you're going to be impacted by existing mandates, okay? So, for example, at Avalara, we have an embedded solution with NetSuite. We also have a standalone solution. So, across those options, businesses can use that to simplify the process, but also automate the way the relevant information is ingested, the invoices are constructed, and then sent through the required network. So technology is really helping businesses to stay abreast of those different mandates, but also make sure that they're sending invoices or adhering to live reporting requirements compliantly.
And I guess in some cases also allowing finance teams to be more focused on doing more strategic initiatives, as opposed to going through some of these high volumes of transactions that no doubt is taking a huge amount of time currently in a very manual process.
You're very right. You're very right. And I think if businesses can utilize technology and can redeploy resources, that is just going to help them to focus on their core priorities. Okay. So you'd be surprised how many businesses do have very manual approaches. So manual approaches to, inputting the tax rates within their system, manual approaches to, providing data for reporting to local advisors. And what we see is that is sometimes a very much disjointed approach. And it can also lend sometimes to human errors, because if you are transmitting data via spreadsheets to local providers, of course, there may be times where there's a human error which can lead to incompliance in a jurisdiction. So, yeah, that's a very good point to make, Adam.
So, Steve, let's get into some of the complexities of these customs compliances. So what are the main challenges you see companies face when navigating customs regulations in different countries? And how can they effectively mitigate some of these risks, associated with non-compliance?
Okay, so the areas where we support businesses and some of the challenges we see, first and foremost, lie with the HS code classifications or the tariff codes. And a number of businesses will have, in some cases, 6 digits they use. But the problem being is when you're, shipping goods and you're doing that customs clearance, in a lot of cases, it's not 6 digits you need for your HS codes or tariff codes. It's actually between 8 to 12, depending on the country. Now, if the HS codes are wrong, that can affect the amount a business is paying in duties when they import. Now, the impact of that means that they may then pay too little. And if that's the case, then the customer will then have to bear the cost if there is a discrepancy. So HS codes are really important because they classify the product, and they are those unique digits or that code that provides that and ensure that it's correct. But then it's taken into consideration that will drive the duty calculation. So they're the really important considerations for businesses when they are shipping internationally tangible goods and they do have that customs clearance to navigate. The other point is as well, like duty rates, things like that, they do change as well. So, having technology that stays abreast of that, with content teams that update the technology to ensure that's correct is also something that's very much desirable for businesses that are shipping at scale internationally.
A couple of things that stood out to me there, Steve, is also, as organizations, we want our customers to have, a great experience of working with our organizations. And certainly, if they're receiving our products, our goods, and then, they're landed with a cost to actually receipt it, because of, perhaps ineffective tax compliance on our side or tax calculations on our side, as an organization or as a customer, that's not a great experience, is it? And, it reflects negatively on our organization.
Yeah, of course. Like customer experience is everything. And businesses, they want to ensure they've got that repeat business. Okay, they want to make sure they've got happy, successful customers, because repeat business is going to help to drive further revenue. But also, if it's a happy customer, they're going to spread the word, and that can again generate more business for companies as they sell into those markets.
Yeah. And you touched on there a little bit how we can, leverage technology like Avalara to help, reduce some of these errors and simplify the compliance process. But perhaps you could share a few common mistakes that companies often make when they're calculating some of these customs duties and perhaps how they can work to avoid that.
I think really it's important to ensure that your HS codes are correct. Okay. So that's something that we do see. Where the HS codes are correct, that means that there is going to potentially be an issue with the duty calculation. So one of the common errors is, how a business is generating those HS codes. Okay, how much rigor is going into that process, because it is essential that they are correct, and it's also the point of keeping up with changing trends, changing regulation as well. So that's really where we sometimes see businesses coming unstuck, and that there is an issue with the amount of duties that are being calculated kind of as they import into that country.
I'd imagine it's particularly prevalent for organizations that have lots of new products being released, at volume, at pace, trying to keep abreast of that manually must be incredibly time consuming. So to have some automation through that process, I'd imagine makes that a much more seamless, easy process, perhaps.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you're a business that's got 2 SKUs, it's not going to be very difficult for you to, stay on top of the HS codes. But if you've got hundreds of SKUs or thousands of SKUs, which is sometimes the case, that's where that becomes even more important. So that again is another really important point that you raised there, Adam.
And there's an interesting one that always sticks with me. I was dealing with one of our mutual customers, All About Brown, and they were setting up stores in the United States, and US sales tax being a particular challenging tax code. You could be in the same state, in the same city, on the same street, perhaps even in the same building, but actually just being on a different floor of the building might actually in turn dictate a different tax code. So it does really get to that level of complexity, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely. And I know we're going to talk about calculation kind of a little bit later, but depending on the way that you conduct yourself, so the types of transactions you have, but also where you sell into, that can obviously have a big impact on the level of complexity. So, for example, we're looking, on the subject of calculation, if you're within the EU and you've got triangulation, or you've got reverse charge, imports, exports, that can make that whole process more complicated, which is why businesses want to leverage a solution that's going to simplify it. And similarly with the US, exceptionally complicated because of all the different taxing jurisdictions, which we can go into in a bit more detail in a moment. But yeah, this is it. When you're selling internationally, there are lots of considerations businesses need to have. And like I say, harnessing technology that can take away a lot of that burden is something that is invaluable for companies that expand.
Fantastic. So perhaps that's a good segue into our next topic around navigating tax requirements. So how can automated tax calculation tools like Avalara help businesses reduce errors and ensure that tax compliance laws in multiple regions are adhered to?
Yeah, this is really important. So, I've been working with a business just this week that are utilizing a local advisor for the US in this case, and they are updating tax rates annually. Okay. So let's have a little think about that. So within the US alone, there were over 120,000 different tax rate updates across the US and Canada in 2023. Okay. So when you think about that, if a business is looking at that on an annual basis, that there's lots and lots of room for incompliance there. They may be charging the incorrect rate. They're not up to date with what those changes are. There's also, tax holidays on a regular basis. I was on holiday in Florida in the summer last year, and I was luckily there when there was one of these tax holidays. So you can imagine we had another suitcase ready to go. We were loading it with as much as we can to benefit from that tax holiday. But when you're thinking about calculation, you've got to make sure that you are taking that into consideration. If it's a tax holiday, you've got to make sure that you're not charging tax on those sales during that time. So lots of complexity there. And the last point on the US is the fact that there is over 14,000 different taxing jurisdictions. Okay. So it's really important that businesses are not just relying on zip code, but also looking at that rooftop calculation. So utilizing lat and long coordinates to ensure that it's completely accurate. And for example, we provide businesses with an accuracy guarantee for the US market. Now, when you look at it internationally as well, obviously it depends on your product. You may have reduced rate products, you may have exempt products. In some cases, some of your customers may go to their basket, and some of the products may be standard rated, some of them may be reduced rates. So, that can be really, really, really complicated. And that's where a sophisticated tax engine is going to ensure that all of those factors are taken into consideration to provide that, real-time accurate calculation to businesses. And I think, Adam, the other point to consider as well is depending on how a business operates, it's not just about point of sale, it's also about quoting as well. So for a number of businesses, they have a sales team, and it might not even be in NetSuite. You do this in Salesforce, for example, and they've got to provide businesses with a quotation. So that's also another instance where the ability to calculate accurately is going to be essential to a business process.
And it's interesting there because, as you say, from an advisory point of view, it's time out the business for finance professionals currently, having to do research to make sure they're making their, customs obligations. Whereas with the Avalara tool, a lot of that insight is provided to them as a customer and actually taking some of that headache away. And whilst you're not tax accountants, obviously your tax insight and awareness of the market and what's changing from a regulatory point of view is of great benefit to customers, I should imagine.
Absolutely. And we can look at that a little bit more deeply. Okay. So, if you think about it, if you're selling internationally and you've got all of those different jurisdictions, all of those different rates, there is a process that you need to go through. Okay. So, for example, when you're calculating tax, you need to take into consideration the location. So first and foremost, you've got the geolocation. So what is the rates for that location that a business is selling into, as well as taking into consideration the ship from. But then the next process is looking at the taxability of the product or service. So they need to be taken into consideration at the same time to provide that accurate calculation. So, for example, our tax engine covers it's over 190 countries around the world. So it gives businesses that peace of mind that as they sell internationally, as they grow, that level of calculation is accurate, taking into consideration the different processes in order to get to that accurate calculation.
And how does some of your technology help optimize some of these reporting processes then?
So yeah, when you've calculated, the next phase is you've got to report it as well. So we've got our tax engine, and that seamlessly connects to NetSuite via pre-built connectors, and we've got very mature connectors. But then, if you're looking at the US market through Avatax, we can automate the process of filing returns and remitting sales tax. But internationally, businesses are looking to harness other solutions in order to, manage their filing processes. So at Avalara, we have other solutions internationally that will pull the required data through pre-built extractors, in the case of NetSuite, to populate the returns ready to be filed across the different countries. Now, some of the really important considerations businesses will have when they're doing that is, number one, once the data is being utilized to create the returns, and we're looking at the filing now, we've done the calculation, we're now looking at pulling the relevant data to create the returns. It's important to validate that data, okay? Because, and if you're doing that with a human eye, that's sometimes where you can make mistakes. So if there's a solution that is going to provide a huge number of different validation checks based on the type of calculation in the country, that's going to be really, really beneficial to businesses to know and to give them that peace of mind that once the return is being created, they're filing a compliant return. So, for example, with Avalara solution, depending on the country and the type of transaction, we do up to 150 validation checks on the data. And if there are any issues with that data, those errors and warnings are raised so they can be rectified prior to the return being created and then being sent to the relevant government portal, okay? The other key element, and I'm sure there's lots of people on the call here that will be able to relate to this, it's not just about creating the return, it's things like reconciliation.
Yeah.
So when you're filing those returns internationally, you want to make sure you're reconciling your general ledger in NetSuite to the return. So you want a situation where that can be done automatically, it can be done quickly, and it can be done accurately. Because we see some businesses, they're spending 2 to 3 days a month reconciling. Okay, so think about how that can be, if that's going to be handled automatically much more quickly. Think about how like I say, the internal resources can be redeployed to focus on other business priorities. So when you're looking at the compliance, once the calculation's been done and you're filing, it's not just the filing, Adam, it's also some of those other responsibilities that go with it as well prior to sending the return across.
And I guess also, from a risk point of view, that no business ever wants to be stung with any tax fines at the end of the year because they've been incorrectly paying, and what ultimately would affect profitability at the end of a financial year as well. You think you're reporting, you're trading at a profitable level of X percentage, but in fact, then you're hit with fines. This is all sort of negative impact to the bottom line and reporting perhaps through PE or VC firms again. So it's having that foresight and insight as to I guess your liability in terms of tax.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's kind of break that down a bit. Let's just reiterate kind of what we've said there. So first and foremost, it's the use of data. So it's making sure that the data is coming into whatever system's being used to create that return, and where technology can be harnessed, that's going to automate that process and reduce that human error. So one place where we see businesses having compliance issues is where manually data is being sent across to create the return. Okay, so automation is helping businesses to, eliminate error in that instance. The other point is checking the data. So if it's a human eye or partially using technology, that can sometimes leave businesses a little bit exposed. But when technology is completing a series of robust checks on the data, that again is removing some of that worry, some of that risk. And then the other really important thing is filing on time. Okay, yes. So businesses want a filing calendar, so they want to know when it's got to be when it's got to be filed. Okay, and they want to be able to kind of look ahead. They want to look at the present month or quarter period. They also want to be able to look back as well. So technology where there's that filing calendar to toggle between, that's really, really beneficial to help businesses plan and make sure that they're filing on time and in the correct format for the tax office. So, for example, Avalara has solutions that enable businesses to have that peace of mind.
And like you say, this can be quite daunting to go solo. So having a trusted partner like ourselves, to help deliver these solutions, with the knowledge of NetSuite, with the knowledge of Avalara, can really take some of these headaches away from the day-to-day operations of your organization. I'd like to take a moment to talk about, some of the new government mandates that are coming into effect. In some cases, already have come into effect, but it continuing to roll out globally about electronic invoicing. It's something that's becoming much more prevalent. Will only continue to do so. What are some of the key steps that businesses should take to ensure compliance and minimize disruption to their operations and customer communications, perhaps?
Yeah, very important. So, at the moment, there are sweeping mandates across countries globally. So if there isn't already a mandate, lots of businesses are targeting the next 2 to 3 years to have an e-invoicing solution in line with that VAT in a Digital Age initiative, particularly across the EU. So first and foremost, it's staying on top of mandates. So businesses are looking for an expert partner who can help them to understand kind of what those mandates are in those countries where they might be impacted. So first and foremost, it's awareness of the mandates. The next point is, if you are impacted by a mandate, it's about utilizing technology to ensure that the relevant data is collected, but then the e-invoices are structured in the correct format relating to that mandate. Now, that can be very, very changeable depending on the country. So some countries, for example, may require a QR code. Some countries may require a digital signature. So it's essential that the e-invoice is created in line with the requirements of that particular mandate. So that's one element.
And that really can't be underestimated, can it, Stephen? Because each country have, their own nuances, requirements, approaches, and, trying to manage that on the customer side. If you're trading in 20, 30 countries, trying to stay on top of that really shouldn't be underestimated, should it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's the mystery as well. It's new. So when anything new impacts you, it's kind of like, and you don't know it, you're not familiar with it, it's even more daunting. So, businesses really want the peace of mind that, they're utilizing a solution that's going to handle it, and it's going to make sure they are compliant as they do it. Okay. Because it's not just about accounts receivable as well, Adam. In a lot of cases, it's about accounts payable. Now, it isn't necessarily that all countries have these mandates in place at the moment, but that's where all of these countries will be going. Okay. So it's about having a solution that can handle kind of the invoices that you're sending out, but also the invoices that you are receiving in line with those particular requirements and the legislation locally. Okay. The next point I'm just going to make about that is it's also important to, adhere to the particular network whereby which the invoice is sent. And lots of countries have different implementation models. So some businesses or some countries, will utilize kind of the PEPL four-corner approach, but some countries may have a clearance approach. So depending on which that is, it will affect the flow of the invoice from, for example, a business to their end customer. So with that being said, there are mandates in place for B2G transactions, B2B transactions, and B2C transactions. Now, in the case of somewhere like Italy, there are mandates for each type. But for some countries, they're rolling out B2G, then they're going to roll out B2B, and then in the future, they may roll out B2C. So you've got to ensure that, you understand the mandate and the requirement for that mandate. You've got to ensure that your data ingestion is correct. You've then got to consider the construction of the e-invoice in line with that mandate, and that is being sent through the correct network, whether it be PEPL in the case of a lot of countries, or, for example, the SDI, which is different for somewhere like Italy.
And how can customers integrate e-invoicing with systems, such as NetSuite, to simplify some of that compliance process?
So Avalara, we've actually got an embedded solution with NetSuite. Okay, so that's gonna make lives much easier for NetSuite users, because that solution's embedded. So when they're kind of scaling, adding new countries, it's already there. It's in NetSuite. We also have kind of a standalone solution. So, for example, in NetSuite's case, they will be having a rollout. So if there is a requirement that's not yet ready in NetSuite, we're supporting businesses directly. But yeah, businesses we see, they kind of want, again, we come back to that lean tech stack. They want to make sure that kind of the processes are as simple as possible. So that's one of the reasons we've got this great long-standing relationship with NetSuite, and we are really pleased to have our solution embedded within their platform.
Absolutely, and I think it's having that that relationship. So when as NetSuite's solution continues to evolve, develop, and many of our customers would have made significant investment in their NetSuite instances, subscriptions, your roadmap is so aligned to the NetSuite roadmap that you almost symbiotically grow alongside and develop your solutions, which I think as a customer gives great reassurance and confidence too.
I think so, yeah. And I think the other thing to consider is that, we've got, for example, over 60 countries within our e-invoicing and live reporting solution, but other countries are, introducing mandates. So it's essential that, any provider has an extensive roadmap so that, as businesses are going to be impacted by those mandates down the road, they're going to be taken into consideration and being brought into the solution. So, at Avalara, for example, we're listening to our customers. We're making sure that our roadmap as much as possible reflects that. So we're growing our coverage as mandates are introduced, and obviously, again, within that embedded solution, once NetSuite complete that rollout, there'll be extensive coverage there.
Wonderful. We've got about 10 minutes left, so we'll move on to our final topic, which is around the tech stack and making sure that it's optimized to support some of our customers' growth. What is the integration between Avalara? How does the integration between Avalara and NetSuite work in terms of simplifying some of that tax compliance?
Yeah, very important. I think it's one thing having the technology, but then it's like how do we integrate? Okay, that's why everyone here is going to be looking at that and thinking, right, okay, we know that, right, that solution, for example, meets our needs, but what's the process of kind of integrating with that solution? So it's a really, really important consideration. So we've discussed e-invoicing. Like I say, Avalara, we're very lucky to have that embedded solution with NetSuite, but we have also got our standalone solution where we can utilize, for example, an API. Now, with other solutions, the way that we support is we have pre-built connectors for Avatax, for our determination engine, because there's that two-way flow. So obviously, they will send a call to Avalara, we send it back, it provides that calculation. So we've got, over 1,200 different pre-built connectors for Avatax. And again, NetSuite being a long-standing partner, we've got a great connector there. And then with other solutions, like, for example, our VAT reporting solution, we have got pre-built extractor to be released that, again, will automate the process of ingesting data. Now, where tech providers are utilizing this makes businesses' life a lot easier because, again, it's the automation, but it also does help to simplify the implementation process, okay? So, how you're implementing a solution is a really, really key consideration. And that's, for example, where, we're lucky enough to have a great partnership with you, Adam, at NoBlue too, because you guys are the experts on how to make the systems work together, seamlessly and manage that implementation process. Because, where businesses are trying other means whereby which to do that, they need an experienced head that understands what the considerations are to ensure that it's delivered on time and delivered successfully. So I guess really I'm interested also to ask you a question, Adam, about that, because Avalara, for example, we have the technology, but we're really, really lucky to work with you. So what's your experience of that process where businesses are looking to develop tax technology within their systems, but also utilize an exceptional partner like NoBlue too to handle that implementation process?
No, thank you, Steve. So I think the most important thing here is two things, really. It's the relationship that we have between our organizations as a trusted partner of Avalara. We've got a team of certified Avalara consultants within our consulting organization. And actually, the reason why it works well is because it's a really seamless engagement, because the team are both NetSuite certified and in many cases, have insight to our customers' NetSuite configurations or customizations, but also the experience on the Avalara side. It's really kind of a one-stop shop to understand the tax complexities, but also how does that fit into your wider NetSuite instance? Is there any ripple effect? Are there any other considerations a customer needs to have? But ultimately, it's also about taking ownership of the implementation to make it simple for our customers. We often have customers that are doing multiple projects at any one time, trying to drive their business forward. So being able to have a partner that can take a lot of that work off their plate, to be able to understand the business's requirements. We do a thorough requirements gathering session to understand both if you don't work with us now, what does your NetSuite instance look like, and the warts and all of that system, but also to understand your tax compliance, to make sure that when we're presenting back with the proposed approach, that everybody's got clarity as to what the ambitions are, what the goals are, and what we're trying to solve, in terms of being able to deliver it as a statement of work to our customers in a timely manner, safe in the knowledge that we've got the team here to deliver on time and on budget.
So you must also have to take into consideration things like data hygiene as well. Is that obviously a big part of the process to help businesses to ensure that where the data sits and what they're bringing in is in the right order to be able to flow through to the different technology systems?
Absolutely. Data is at the core of projects like this, and making sure that that's in good health and good working order to begin with, and maybe identifying in some cases where it might not be, and if we need input from the customer to help to sanitize some of that, so that when we come to start the project, that it's a seamless approach. Ultimately, you can only report on good data. If that is out of sync or inaccurate, then it makes the next stage is much more challenging. So working with customers to make sure that everything is clear, precise, to enable really the outputs that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think on our side, it's all about happy, successful customers, and like I say, successful implementation is a huge part of that. And a lot of businesses will have clear go live targets. So I'd be really interested to know, we speak to businesses that we support that work with you, and you deliver it on time. What are the key considerations to really manage the timeline and the expectations of businesses where they do have those very clear go live expectations?
I think the first thing comes down to communication. First of all, understanding the timelines, understanding what is critical to be delivered, and understanding requirements, and making sure that we're touching base with our customer regularly. We're sharing regular updates. We are bringing the right people in to support the implementation as and when required, but ultimately also trying to anticipate any challenges in a project. We've done this a number of times, as I say, over 40 implementations for our customers. So we've got experience in doing this. So, where we see a customer might be potentially going off track in terms of maybe focus, or actually maybe not paying enough attention to some detail in some of the complexity, trying to steer the project and the implementation and keep it on track, and try to anticipate some of the challenges so that we're ultimately adhering to timelines.
Excellent. And I think from my experience as well is working really closely with like Noble 2 and ensure they're part of the whole process, just means that communication, as you said, Adam, is there and is so important. And it means that you're able to set those clear milestones, really understand the business, and lead to that successful utilization of obviously technologies.
Absolutely. We've got a couple of moments left, and I don't know about you, but we've been having some questions pinging through that have stood out. But there's one here in particular from James that's kindly submitted a question. And James has said, we're rolling out NetSuite in Q2. How long is the setup process for Avalara, and how can we get started sooner and integrate in the coming months, as we as a customer project starting in the coming few days? So I guess the question is, does NetSuite have to get to a certain level of completion, or is this something that can be done alongside? Any insights into that, James, perhaps?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in a lot of cases, it does depend on the solution. It does depend on the context a lot of the time, but that's something that we would consider as we're going through the process with a business. But for example, Avatax, if it's a tax engine, and a lot of time that's done in collaboration in the same time. And again, back to your point where there's lots of projects going on at the same time, that's where it's always good to utilize an implementation partner to ensure that that's being done in sync with NetSuite to be able to achieve those targets of go live. Okay, so depending in terms of the time, it would be very specific. It depends on, like for example, the number of countries, the number of transactions, when you're looking at reporting, certainly the number of countries and where the data sits, things like that. So, we would need to look at, the context, and then we would be able to give businesses, a clear understanding of what that timeline looks like. I think, Adam, where we have businesses that do have a very ambitious go live, that's again an example of where we would utilize yourselves, because you have got the experience to accelerate that process. and help businesses to achieve their goals to get live on time. So I think it's about looking at the context of the business, looking at what the best process is to get where they need to be for that timeline of go live.
With electronic invoicing, so there's obviously some countries that have mandates at present, but say for example we were trading into another jurisdiction, let's say Portugal. Portugal said we're mandating electronic invoicing. How easy is it for an Avalara customer to then start setting up more countries that they're transacting with and trading into?
One of the key features of Avalara solution is it's scalable. So we've got one single API, okay, but it's a solution that's very much scalable. So once the work has been done, that API has been built, or utilizing the embedded solution within NetSuite, it's then really easy to add additional countries. So if we look at a use case here, let's say, for example, it took a business 6 to 8 weeks, for example, to build that initial connection, that API connection. When you're then adding additional countries, it's a much quicker process. So it may be week, 2 weeks, depending on kind of the resources that are being deployed to kind of manage that process. But the solution is designed to be scalable, and we recognize that businesses may have immediate needs, but they're also going to need to react effectively to mandates as they're impacted by those further down the line. So our solution has been designed to be easy for businesses to scale and add additional countries as they're impacted by mandates. But that is a very, very important question, and that's one of the main considerations businesses that have multiple entities have, is how do we scale up? How easy is it to do that? So certainly, we can show businesses kind of what that looks like in practice and how easy it is to do so.
Fantastic. Well, James, I think we're nearly coming to the end of our time now. So thank you everyone for your attention this morning. Please do follow up with any questions you have. You've got James and I's details on screen. Also, we've got a QR code on screen that will take you through to learn more about Avalara. Well, all remains to be said is thank you, Steve, for your insight and expertise today. It's been a pleasure talking. Thank you to all of our attendees today. We hope you've taken some value from today, and we'll be following up in due course to say thanks for your attendance. And please do reach out with any questions. So thank you and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody.